Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the sandals of ancient Rome, walking beside a man who would become legend, Julius Caesar, a name that still echoes through history, whispered in classrooms and shouted in movies. But before the laurel wreaths and the Senate floor stained with blood, there was just a boy born into a world on fire. Picture Rome in 100 BCE, not the marble empire you're imagining. This Rome is crumbling. Civil wars rage. Blood runs in the streets. Generals march their armies against each other. And the Republic, that beautiful idea of shared power, is tearing itself apart like wild dogs over a carcass. Young Gaius Julius Caesar watches all. His family claims descent from Venus herself, the goddess of love. Quite the flex at Roman dinner parties. But divine ancestry doesn't pay the bills, and the Julii, while noble, aren't exactly rolling in denarii. They're aristocrats, sure, but the broke kind. The kind who have to work for their power. Caesar's father dies when the boy is just 15. Suddenly, he's the man of the house. Historians still argue whether this early loss shaped his relentless ambition or if he was simply born hungry for glory. Maybe both. Maybe neither. What we know is this. Young Caesar had something. That indefinable quality that makes people turn their heads when someone enters a room. He's tall for a Roman, around 5'7", which might not sound impressive today, but in ancient Rome, that's decent height. Dark eyes, sharp features. And here's a fun fact that would haunt him forever. Caesar was apparently obsessed with his receding hairline. Yes, the man who would conquer Gaul and cross the Rubicon spent an embarrassing amount of time trying different hairstyles to cover his balding head. The Senate even gave him the right to wear a laurel wreath at all times, supposedly for his military victories. But let's be honest, that wreath was doing double duty as ancient Rome's first comb-over. The city around him pulses with life. Market stalls overflow with grain from Egypt, silk from the East, and, this is truly bizarre, crocodile dung from the Nile, which wealthy Roman women use as sunscreen. Yes, you heard that right. Crocodile dung. On their faces, beauty standards have always been wild. But young Caesar isn't thinking about cosmetics. He's thinking about power. At 16, he becomes the head priest of Jupiter, a prestigious religious position that comes with connections, influence, and a very strict rule. The priest of Jupiter cannot look upon a dead body or touch iron. Imagine being a teenage boy in ancient Rome, and you're not allowed to see corpses or weapons. In a city where public executions are entertainment and gladiators fight to the death in the forum. It doesn't last long. The dictator Sulla, one of those generals tearing Rome apart, takes power and demands Caesar divorce his wife, Cornelia. She's connected to Sulla's enemies, you see, a political liability. Caesar refuses. This is huge. You don't say no to Sulla. Sulla's idea of conflict resolution involves prescription lists, public death warrants where anyone can kill you for a reward. But Caesar, barely out of his teens, looks at the most dangerous man in Rome and says, no. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always fascinating to see who's drifting off to sleep and who's just starting their day with ancient history. Caesar flees Rome. He hides in the countryside, moving from place to place, always one step ahead of Sulla's assassins. He catches malaria, shivering with fever in some farmer's hut, wondering if this is how it ends. Not in glory, not in battle, but sick and alone before his life really begins. But it doesn't end. Sulla eventually pardons him, though legend says the dictator warned, in that boy, there are many Mariuses. Marius was Sulla's greatest enemy. It's not a compliment. It's a prophecy. Caesar returns to Rome changed. Harder. Hungrier. He knows now that power is everything. That mercy is weakness. That in Rome, you either rise to the top or you're crushed beneath someone else climbing over you. He joins the military, serves in Asia Minor, and here's where it gets interesting. Caesar wins the civic crown, Rome's highest military honor, for saving a fellow soldier's life in battle. 20-year-old Caesar charging into combat, pulling a wounded man to safety while arrows fill the air around them. The same man who will one day be called tyrant started his career as a hero. That's the thing about Caesar. He's never just one thing, never simple. He's a contradiction walking through history in a toga, generous and ruthless, brilliant and vain, beloved and despised. But all of that is still ahead of him. Right now, in this moment, he's just a young man with a famous name, a receding hairline he's very sensitive about, and an ambition that burns hotter than any fever. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're back in Rome now. The fever has broken. Sulla is dead, and young Caesar stands in the Forum, watching the city's heartbeat pulse through marble and stone. This is where power lives, not in temples or palaces, but here, in the open-air plaza where senators debate, merchants haggle, and the mob can turn on you faster than you can say Ave Caesar. Which, by the way, nobody's saying yet. He's still just another ambitious politician in a city full of them. Caesar needs money. Divine ancestry doesn't impress creditors, and you can't buy influence with a famous name alone. So he does what ambitious young Romans do. He becomes a lawyer, but not the boring kind. Caesar specializes in prosecuting corrupt governors, powerful men who've been bleeding the provinces dry. It's dangerous work. These men have armies, assassins, and very long memories. But it's also spectacular publicity. Picture Caesar in the Forum, his voice carrying across the crowd. He's not the greatest orator Rome has ever seen. That honor belongs to Cicero, who can make grown senators weep with his rhetoric. But Caesar has something else. Clarity. Precision. When Caesar speaks, you understand exactly what he means. No flowery metaphors. No philosophical tangents. Just cold, sharp truth delivered like a gladius between the ribs. The crowds love him. Here's something historians still debate. Was Caesar genuinely fighting corruption, or was he just eliminating rivals while building his own reputation? Maybe both. Maybe he didn't even see a difference. In Rome, justice and ambition were the same toga. He loses most of these cases, by the way. The system is rigged. The corrupt governors have the Senate in their pockets. But Caesar doesn't care about winning. He cares about being seen trying. Every loss makes him look like the underdog, the people's champion fighting against impossible odds. It's brilliant political theater. Then Caesar does something wild. He gets kidnapped by pirates. Yes, really. He's sailing to Rhodes to study philosophy, because of course even military men studied philosophy back then. When Cilician pirates capture his ship, they demand 20 talents of silver for his ransom. 20 talents. That's roughly $1 million in today's money. Caesar laughs in their faces. He tells them he's worth at least 50 talents. The pirates, confused but flattered, agree. So Caesar sends his companions to raise the money while he spends 38 days as a prisoner. And here's where it gets weird. He acts like he's the one in charge. He joins their games, reads them his poetry, and when they don't appreciate his verses, he calls them illiterate barbarians. To their faces, while they're holding him hostage. He also promises to crucify them all once he's free. They think he's joking. He's not. The ransom arrives. Caesar goes free. Immediately, and I mean immediately, he raises a fleet, hunts down those pirates, captures them, and has every single one crucified. Though in a moment of what passes for mercy in ancient Rome, he has their throats cut first. Quick death, then crucifixion. Because Caesar keeps his promises, but he's not cruel. Well, not unnecessarily cruel. This story spreads across the Mediterranean faster than the pirate ships ever sailed. Everyone's talking about the crazy Roman who trash-talked his kidnappers and then actually followed through on his threats. It's the kind of story that builds legends. Back in Rome, Caesar climbs the cursus honorum, the ladder of political offices every ambitious Roman must climb. Quaestor, aedile, praetor. Each rung brings more power, more responsibility, and most importantly, more debt. Because here's the thing about Roman politics. You have to spend money to make money. Want to be aedile? Better throw games for the people. Gladiators. Wild beast hunts. The works. Caesar goes broke throwing the best games Rome has ever seen. He brings in exotic animals from Africa. lions, elephants, even a giraffe, which Romans had never seen before and honestly weren't quite sure what to do with. The crowd goes absolutely wild. Caesar is now the most popular man in Rome, and also deeply, catastrophically in debt. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Caesar's debts are more ridiculous than that. He owes so much money that his creditors should logically have him killed. But they don't. You know why? Because they believe he'll eventually have the power to pay them back. And in Rome, betting on ambition is sometimes smarter than demanding cash. Caesar becomes Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. It's a lifetime appointment, massive prestige, serious political influence, and he wins it through a combination of bribery, charm, and sheer audacity. He's not even 40 years old, and he's beaten men twice his age for Rome's most sacred religious office. His mother cries when he leaves for the election. She knows, everyone knows, that if Caesar loses this vote, his debts will crush him. He'll be exiled, or worse. Caesar kisses her goodbye and says something history remembers. Mother, today you'll see your son as Pontifex Maximus, or not at all. He wins. Of course he wins. You're starting to notice a pattern here. Caesar doesn't do anything small. He doesn't hedge his bets or play it safe. He goes all in every single time, and somehow the dice keep rolling his way. But the thing about always winning? Eventually, people start wondering when you'll lose. And more importantly, they start wanting to be there when it happens. You stand at the edge of the known world. Behind you, Rome, civilization, marble temples gleaming white in the sun. Ahead, Gaul, dark forests that swallow armies whole. Tribes who wear the heads of their enemies as trophies. Rivers so cold they'll stop your heart. This is where Rome ends and barbarism begins. Caesar is 42 years old when he becomes governor of Gaul. It's meant to be a quiet posting, a chance to make some money, govern a few peaceful provinces, then return to Rome for the next political fight. That's how it works for most governors. They show up, collect taxes, maybe build a road or two, and go home richer than they arrived. Caesar has other plans. He arrives in Gaul with 4 legions, about 24,000 men. Professional soldiers in segmented armor, carrying the gladius and scutum, trained to fight in formation like a machine made of flesh and iron. They march in perfect columns, their sandals beating the earth in rhythm. Each man carries about 60 pounds of equipment. Armor, weapons, tools, rations, a stake for the camp palisade. The Roman legion doesn't just fight. It builds. It engineers. It transforms wilderness into civilization, one camp at a time. Caesar learns that the Helvetii, a Gallic tribe, are planning to migrate through Roman territory. Hundreds of thousands of people, wagons, cattle, warriors. They want to cross Gaul to find new lands in the west. Caesar tells them no. They ignore him. So he builds a wall, 19 miles long, with forts every 100 yards, in less than 3 weeks. The Helvetii are stunned. Who builds a wall that fast? Romans, apparently. When the Helvetii try to cross anyway, Caesar's legions slaughter them. Women, children, warriors, everyone who doesn't surrender immediately. It's brutal. It's efficient. It's a message written in blood. Rome is not to be crossed. Literally. But here's where Caesar's genius shows. He doesn't just fight. He writes. Every winter, when the campaigning season ends, Caesar sits in his headquarters and writes detailed accounts of everything that happened. Not propaganda. Well, not just propaganda. These are military reports so clear, so precise, so engaging that they become bestsellers back in Rome. The commentaries on the Gallic War. You've probably had to read them in Latin class. Gallia est omnis divisa in partes tres. All Gaul is divided into 3 parts. That's Caesar, opening his war memoir like he's giving a geography lesson, then proceeding to describe 8 years of conquest, betrayal, and warfare with the same calm tone you'd use to explain how to bake bread. Historians still argue whether Caesar provoked conflicts deliberately to justify his wars, or if he was genuinely defending Roman interests. The answer is probably yes. Both. Caesar was a master at creating situations where he had to intervene, then intervening so decisively that nobody could question whether it was necessary. The Gallic tribes don't fight like Romans. They're brave, insanely brave. They'll charge Roman lines, screaming war cries, naked except for paint and jewelry, trusting in courage and gods whose names you can't pronounce. Individual Gallic warriors are often better fighters than individual Romans. Taller, stronger, wielding long slashing swords that can cut a man in half. But courage doesn't beat discipline, and gods don't stop pilum. The Roman javelin designed to pierce shields and bend on impact so enemies can't throw them back. When a Gallic charge hits a Roman shield wall, it's like a wave breaking against stone. The formation holds. The gladii come out, short stabbing swords perfect for close combat. The killing is mechanical, almost boring in its efficiency. Caesar fights alongside his men. That's important. He's not sitting in a tent while others die. He's there, in the mud and blood, wearing his general's cloak so everyone could see him. When a legion breaks and runs, Caesar grabs a standard, the eagle that represents the legion's honor, and carries it forward himself. Soldiers can't abandon their standard. They follow him back into the fight. He crosses the Rhine, the great river separating Gaul from Germania, and builds a bridge. Not a boat bridge, a proper engineering marvel. His legions, constructed in 10 days, march across to terrify the German tribes on the other side, then march back and tear the bridge down. The message: Rome can go anywhere. Rome could do anything. There is no river wide enough to stop the legions. Then Caesar does something nobody expected. He invades Britain. This is beyond the known world. Romans think Britain is the edge of the ocean, a mysterious island shrouded in mist where druids perform dark magic and warriors paint themselves blue. Most Romans aren't even sure it exists. Caesar takes 2 legions and crosses the channel in ships. The first invasion is almost a disaster. The ships are wrong for the shallow British coast. The soldiers have to jump into the surf in full armor while British chariots, yes, chariots, which Rome hasn't used in warfare for centuries, race along the beach hurling javelins. One standard-bearer jumps into the water first, shaming the rest into following. They establish a beachhead, do some fighting, then leave before winter storms trap them. The second invasion goes better. More ships, more men, better planning. Caesar marches inland, crosses the Thames, defeats British tribes, and accepts their surrender. Then he leaves again. He doesn't conquer Britain. He doesn't establish permanent forts. He just goes there, plants the Roman flag, proves it can be done. Back in Rome, people lose their minds. Caesar has reached the edge of the world and returned. He's brought back pearls from British rivers, though Roman jewelers note they're rather poor quality compared to Eastern pearls. He's described elephant-like creatures that might be aurochs or might be something else. He's a legend now, not just a politician. But Gaul isn't finished with him yet. The tribes are learning. They're starting to unite. And somewhere in the forests, a king named Vercingetorix is watching Caesar's legions and planning something Rome hasn't seen in Gaul before: organized resistance. The worst was still to come. You're standing beside a river. Not a mighty river. Not the Rhine or the Danube. Just a small stream in northern Italy, so narrow you could probably jump across it if you tried. On a map, it's barely worth mentioning. In winter, it's cold and muddy and completely unremarkable. The Rubicon. This little stream is the boundary between Gaul and Italy proper. Roman law is crystal clear. No general may cross this river with an army. Once you cross the Rubicon, you're bringing military force into the heartland. You're committing treason. The penalty is death if you lose. Caesar stands on the bank with 1 legion, the 13th. His most loyal soldiers, veterans of Gaul who've followed him through 8 years of warfare, who've seen him fight beside them, who've grown rich on plunder and bonuses that Caesar personally guaranteed. They'd follow him anywhere, even into civil war. Behind Caesar, Gaul, his provinces, his legions, his power base. Ahead, Rome, the Senate, his enemies who've been sharpening their knives for years. The Senate has ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome alone. They want to prosecute him for actions taken during his governorship. Legal actions, they claim. But Caesar knows better. If he enters Rome without his legions, he'll be convicted, exiled, or killed before the trial even ends properly. His enemies, particularly Cato, who hates him with the burning passion of a man who's never forgiven anyone for anything, will destroy him. So Caesar has a choice: obey the law, cross the river alone, and die, or cross with his army and plunge Rome into civil war. It's January 49 BCE, cold enough that your breath fogs in the air. The river looks black in the winter light. Historians still argue about what happened next, whether Caesar hesitated, whether he quoted Greek poetry, whether he really said what history claims he said. Some accounts have him pausing for a long time, weighing consequences. Others have him crossing immediately, barely breaking stride. The truth is lost somewhere in that muddy water. What we do know: Caesar turned to his officers and said something that's echoed through history for 2,000 years. Alia iacta est. The die is cast. Then he crossed. One step into the water. One step that changes everything. His legion follows. 2,300 men splashing through the Rubicon, their armor clinking, standards held high, knowing that they've just become traitors to the Republic they've spent their lives defending. But they're loyal to Caesar, not to the Senate. That's the thing about the late Republic. Soldiers stop fighting for Rome and start fighting for generals who pay them. News reaches Rome like thunder. Caesar has crossed the Rubicon. Caesar is marching on Italy. Caesar has declared war on the Republic itself. The Senate panics. Pompey the Great, Rome's other legendary general, Caesar's former ally and current enemy, promises he can raise legions. He stamps his foot and claims soldiers will spring from Italian soil. They don't. Caesar moves fast, faster than anyone expected. He marches down Italy, and something strange happens. Cities open their gates. Soldiers sent to stop him switch sides instead. Pompey's recruits take one look at Caesar's veterans, men who've conquered Gaul, who've crossed the Rhine, who've invaded Britain, and decide they'd rather join than fight. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Pompey's military strategy makes about as much sense. Pompey flees to Greece, taking the Senate with him. Caesar enters Rome without a battle. The city is his. But it's a hollow victory because the real power, Pompey's legions, the Senate's legitimacy, the treasury's gold, sailed away across the Adriatic. Caesar can't stay in Rome. He's dictator of an empty capital. So he does what any self-respecting Roman general would do. He goes to Spain first, crushes Pompey's legions there, then chases Pompey to Greece. The civil war becomes a chase across the Mediterranean, from Italy to Spain to Greece to Egypt, spreading like blood and water. The Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE decides everything. Two Roman armies face each other on a Greek plain. Pompey commands the larger force, twice Caesar's numbers. His cavalry should crush Caesar's flanks. His infantry should overwhelm the smaller army through sheer weight. On paper, Pompey wins this battle 10 times out of 10. Caesar wins anyway. He positions a reserve line specifically to counter Pompey's cavalry. When the horsemen charge, Caesar's hidden infantry leap up and stab them in the faces with pila, a tactic so unexpected, so brutal, that Pompey's cavalry breaks and flees. The rest of Pompey's army collapses like a house of cards. Thousands die. Pompey escapes by abandoning his soldiers, his camp, his dignity. He flees to Egypt, hoping the young King Ptolemy will shelter him. Ptolemy welcomes him, then has him murdered and decapitated on the beach. When Caesar arrives in Egypt days later, they present him with Pompey's head in a basket. Caesar allegedly weeps. Maybe he's genuinely sad. Pompey was once his son-in-law, after all. Or maybe he's crying because someone else killed his enemy, robbing him of the chance to show mercy, to play the magnanimous victor. We'll never know for sure. What happens next in Egypt is another story, involving a queen, a carpet, and a relationship that will reshape the Mediterranean world. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, Caesar stands victorious over the republic he's just destroyed. He crossed a river and changed history. One step, one decision, the die cast and fallen where it may, showing the numbers that would end one era and begin another. Rome will never be the same. You're back in Rome, and everything has changed. The Senate still meets. The temples still stand. The forum still fills with people every morning. But underneath it all, everyone knows this is Caesar's city now, not the Republic's, not the people's. One man holds all the power, and that man has just fought a civil war to keep it. Caesar becomes dictator, not the temporary kind Rome occasionally appoints during emergencies. The permanent kind. Dictator perpetuo. Dictator for life. It's a title that makes senators uncomfortable, makes them shift in their togas and remember stories about the king's Rome expelled 500 years ago. Rome doesn't do kings. The Republic was founded on that principle. But Caesar isn't calling himself king. Just dictator. Totally different. Completely legal. Nothing to worry about. He starts changing everything. First, the calendar. Yes, the calendar. Because the Roman calendar is a disaster. It's based on the moon, but the priests who maintain it keep adding random days to extend their terms of office or to mess with political rivals. By the time Caesar takes power, the calendar is running about 3 months ahead of the actual seasons. Romans are celebrating spring festivals in winter. Farmers don't know when to plant. It's chaos. Caesar, who studied astronomy in Egypt, probably between fighting a war and romancing Cleopatra, fixes it. He creates the Julian calendar. 365 days, with a leap year every 4 years. 12 months. The month of Quintilis gets renamed Julius in his honor. We call it July now. It's so well designed that we're basically still using it 2,000 years later. When you check your phone for the date, you're using Caesar's calendar. That's the kind of legacy most people can only dream about. Then he tackles Rome's debt crisis. Remember all those creditors betting Caesar would eventually pay them back? He does. Sort of. He cancels some debts, restructures others, limits interest rates. The wealthy hate it. The common people love it. Caesar doesn't particularly care what either group thinks. He's balancing books and buying loyalty at the same time. He grants citizenship to people throughout Italy and the provinces. This is huge. Roman citizenship means rights, protection, legal status. Caesar hands it out like candy, diluting the exclusivity that old Roman families have guarded for generations. Senators are horrified, but Caesar is building an empire, and empires need citizens who feel invested in the system, not excluded from it. He reforms the Senate itself, adding new members. Gauls, Spaniards, even some former enemies. The old guard watches these foreigners in togas walking into the Senate house and nearly has collective heart failure. There's a joke circulating Rome. Someone asks for directions to the Senate, and the response is, which one? The one where Romans meet? Or the one where barbarians pretend to be Romans? Caesar either doesn't hear the joke or doesn't care. He's reshaping Rome into something new. Not a republic where power is shared among noble families. Not a democracy where citizens vote on everything. Something else. A system where one brilliant, efficient, pragmatic leader makes all the decisions while maintaining the appearance of traditional government. Historians still argue whether Caesar was a tyrant destroying the republic or a necessary reformer saving Rome from itself. The answer, frustratingly, might be both. The republic was broken. Decades of civil wars prove that. But Caesar's solution was to concentrate all power in his own hands, which is either visionary or terrifying, depending on your perspective. He plans massive public works projects, a new forum, libraries, a canal through the Isthmus of Corinth, draining marshes around Rome to prevent disease. He wants to divert the Tiber River, the Tiber, to give Rome a better harbor. These aren't the projects of a man planning to retire. These are the plans of someone who expects to rule for decades. But while Caesar's rebuilding Rome, something's growing in the shadows. Resentment. The old families, the ones who've held power for generations, watch Caesar mock everything they believe in. Their traditions, their privileges, their entire worldview. Caesar sits in a golden chair in the Senate. He accepts honors that edge closer and closer to kingship. There are statues of him in temples standing next to gods. His face is on coins while he's still alive, which isn't how Rome does things. One day, someone offers Caesar a crown during a public festival. He refuses it 3 times. Each time, The crowd cheers. But the senators watching notice something. Caesar refuses, but he doesn't seem entirely sincere about it. Like he's performing reluctance rather than feeling it. Like he's testing the waters to see if Rome is ready for a king. Rome is not ready for a king. Caesar plans a military campaign against Parthia, Rome's great eastern enemy. He's going to leave Rome with his legions, conquer Parthia like he conquered Gaul, and return more powerful than ever. The Senate has set the departure date, March 18th, 44 BCE. That gives his enemies a deadline. If they're going to act, it has to be before Caesar leaves Rome. Once he's back with his legions, surrounded by soldiers who love him, stopping him becomes impossible. The window is closing. Days, not weeks. In aristocratic homes across Rome, men who've served with Caesar, fought beside him, benefited from his patronage, start having quiet conversations. They meet in secret. They talk about the Republic, about tyranny, about duty. They talk about knives. Caesar receives warnings. A soothsayer tells him to beware the Ides of March, March 15th. His wife Calpurnia has nightmares about his death. Friends advise him to bring bodyguards to the Senate. Caesar refuses. He's surrounded by senators, by colleagues, by people he's worked with for decades. What could possibly go wrong? You know the answer. Everyone knows the answer. But right now, on March 14th, as Caesar goes to bed in his house on the Palatine Hill, planning for Parthia, dreaming of more conquests, more glory, more reshaping of the world in his image. Right now, he doesn't know that he has less than 24 hours to live. The Ides of March are coming. You wake up on March 15th, 44 BCE. It's just another day in Rome. Vendors are setting up in the markets. Slaves are fetching water from fountains. The sun rises over the 7 hills like it always does. Nobody's marked this day on the calendar as special. It's just the Ides, the middle of the month. Nothing more. Except everything. The conspiracy has been growing for weeks like infection under healthy skin. Marcus Brutus leads it. Remember Brutus. He's important. He's young, idealistic, and haunted by his ancestor, the Brutus who helped overthrow Rome's last king 5 centuries ago. That Brutus made Rome a republic. This Brutus thinks he needs to save the republic from Caesar. They've been colleagues. Caesar pardoned Brutus after Pharsalus, even though Brutus fought for Pompey. He gave him positions, honors, trust. Caesar probably thinks of Brutus as something like a son. There are even rumors, whispered, never proven, that Brutus might actually be Caesar's biological son. Caesar had an affair with Brutus's mother decades ago. The timing works. Historians still argue whether Caesar was Brutus's father. The Romans certainly gossiped about it. Imagine, Brutus might be planning to kill his own father. But Brutus isn't alone. Gaius Cassius is the real organizer. Cassius is practical, bitter, and nursing grudges like fine wine. He fought well in Parthia, commanded fleets, served the Republic faithfully. Caesar pardoned him too after the Civil War, made him praetor. But Cassius wanted more. He wanted to be the senior praetor, the important one, and Caesar gave that position to Brutus instead. Small insult, giant consequence. Cassius recruits quietly. A senator here, a military tribune there. Always carefully. Always men who feel slighted by Caesar or who genuinely believe the Republic is dying. He needs about 60 conspirators to make this work. Not because it takes 60 men to kill one man. It doesn't, but because afterward they'll need enough senators standing together to claim legitimacy. This isn't murder. It's tyrannicide. It's patriotism. That's what they tell themselves. They call themselves the liberatores, the liberators. They're planning to free Rome from tyranny by stabbing Caesar to death in the Senate House. Then they'll announce to the people that the tyrant is dead, the Republic is restored, and everything can go back to how it was before Caesar crossed the Rubicon. They genuinely believe this will work. Here's what's wild. They don't plan beyond the assassination. There's no strategy for what happens after. No plan for Caesar's armies still loyal to him. No consideration of Mark Antony, Caesar's second-in-command, who's essentially Caesar without the charm, but with extra violence. They're focused entirely on the moment of the knife, not the consequences of the blade. Caesar receives more warnings. That soothsayer, Spurina is his name, approaches Caesar in the street days earlier. "Beware the Ides of March," he says. It's so dramatic it sounds made up, but multiple sources report it. Caesar probably laughs it off. He survived wars, assassins, pirates, political rivals. Some street prophet isn't going to scare him. Calpurnia's nightmares get worse. She dreams she's holding Caesar's corpse, blood soaking through her fingers. She begs him not to go to the Senate. It's not like Calpurnia to be superstitious or fearful. Caesar knows this, but he's scheduled a Senate meeting to discuss his Parthian campaign. Important business. Can't cancel for a nightmare. Friends warn him too. They've heard rumors. Nothing concrete, just whispers that something's planned. Caesar dismisses them. He disbanded his Spanish bodyguards months ago, a show of confidence in the Senate, proof he doesn't fear his colleagues. Now he walks through Rome protected only by his reputation and the assumption that nobody would dare. The assumption is wrong. The morning of March 15th, Caesar wakes in his home. Calpurnia is still upset. Caesar decides, briefly, not to go. He'll send word that he's ill. The Senate can meet without him. But then Mark Antony arrives with Decimus Brutus. Yes, another Brutus. This one's a co-conspirator, but Caesar doesn't know that. Decimus is one of Caesar's most trusted generals. Fought with him in Gaul, commanded fleets, received honors and positions. Decimus says the Senate is waiting. Important matters to discuss. People will talk if Caesar doesn't show. They'll say he's afraid, or worse, that he's being controlled by his wife's dreams. In Rome, appearance matters. Reputation is everything. Caesar agrees to go. He puts on his toga, the special one, purple trimmed, signifying his rank. He doesn't bring guards. He doesn't bring weapons. Just Caesar, walking through Rome like any other day, heading to the theater of Pompey where the Senate is meeting while their regular building is being renovated. The theater of Pompey, built by Pompey the Great, Caesar's enemy, Caesar's victim. The irony would be poetic if anyone had time to appreciate it. The conspirators are already there, wearing togas with daggers hidden in the folds. 60 men, all carrying blades, all waiting. Some are nervous. Some are excited. Some are already regretting their decision, but too committed to back out. Cassius looks like a man about to jump off a cliff. Brutus looks like a statue, calm, cold, convinced of his righteousness. They planned everything. Who strikes first? Where to stand? How to surround him so he can't escape. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend who might try to intervene, will be delayed outside by Trebonius, another conspirator. They've thought of everything except what comes after. Caesar enters the theater of Pompey. He sees the senators, familiar faces, colleagues. Some he's pardoned, some he's promoted, some he considers friends. The morning sun streams through the columns. It's almost time for the meeting to begin. Spurina, the soothsayer, is there, standing at the edge of the crowd. Caesar sees him and smiles. "The Ides of March have come," Caesar says. A small joke. "See? Nothing happened. Your prophecy was wrong." Spurina doesn't smile back. "Yes," he says, "but they have not yet passed." The moment arrives like a held breath, finally released. Caesar enters the Senate meeting. 60 senators. One dictator. Daggers hidden in 60 folds of white wool. The morning sun creates geometric patterns through the columns of Pompey's theater, and everything seems normal. Just another Senate session. Just another day in the Republic that isn't really a republic anymore. Someone hands Caesar a petition. It's Tullius Cimber, one of the conspirators. He's asking Caesar to recall his exiled brother. Caesar barely glances at it. He's got more important things to discuss. The Parthian campaign, military logistics, the glory that awaits him in the east. He waves Cimber away dismissively. Cimber doesn't leave. He steps closer, insistent. Other senators start gathering around Caesar's chair. They're pressing in, crowding him, all pretending to support Cimber's petition. It's too many people too close. Caesar feels the wrongness of it. The air changes. That instinct that's kept him alive through a dozen battlefields starts screaming. Cimber grabs Caesar's toga, pulls it down off his shoulder. It's the signal, the moment. Everything that's been planned in whispered conversations and sleepless nights suddenly becomes real, becomes inevitable, becomes blood and iron and screaming. Casca strikes first, his dagger aimed at Caesar's neck, but his hand is shaking. Fear, adrenaline, the weight of killing the most powerful man in the world, and the blade glances off, cutting Caesar's shoulder instead of his throat. It's a wound, but not a killing blow. Caesar roars. He's not young anymore. He's 55, balding, probably dealing with epilepsy that he hides from everyone. But he's still Caesar, still the man who fought hand-to-hand in Gaul, who crossed the Rubicon, who conquered half the known world. He spins, grabs Casca's arm, and drives his stylus, his writing instrument, through Casca's hand. The stylus wasn't meant to be a weapon, but Caesar's making it one. Then the others attack. All at once. Daggers everywhere. 23 men with blades converging on one man. Caesar tries to fight. He punches one attacker, kicks another. But there are too many knives, too many hands holding him. He's being stabbed from every direction. Arms, legs, chest, back. The daggers are short, designed to hide under togas, so each wound is shallow. No single cut is immediately fatal. He's dying by 1,000 deliberate wounds. The other senators flee. They're scrambling over each other, desperate to escape. Some don't know what's happening. Some are horrified. Some had suspicions, but didn't want to know for certain. The chamber empties in seconds, leaving just Caesar and his killers in a circle of violence. Caesar sees Brutus. Brutus is there, dagger in hand. Caesar's protege, possibly his son, definitely someone Caesar loved and trusted. Their eyes meet. Historians still argue about what Caesar said in that moment. The famous line, "Et tu, Brute?" might be Shakespeare's invention. Ancient sources say Caesar spoke in Greek. Kai su teknon, you too, child? Maybe he said both. Maybe neither. Maybe he couldn't speak at all with blood filling his lungs. What we know, Brutus stabs him. Caesar stops fighting after that. He pulls his toga over his head, a final act of dignity, ensuring he dies covered rather than exposed. Or maybe he just can't bear to see Brutus's face anymore. He collapses at the base of Pompey's statue. The irony is perfect. Caesar, who defeated Pompey, dying at Pompey's marble feet. 23 stab wounds. The physicians will count them later. 23 daggers. 23 traitors. 23 men who all believed they were saving Rome. Only one wound was actually fatal, the second strike to the chest that pierced his heart. All the others were just participation. Everyone wanting to share in the act, to share the guilt or glory, to say they were there when the tyrant fell. Caesar dies. The most powerful man in Rome bleeds out on a Senate floor, while his killers stand around him, breathing hard, covered in blood. His and each other's, because in the frenzy they'd stabbed each other too. The chamber is silent except for their ragged breathing and the sound of blood dripping on a marble. Then someone starts to laugh. Nervous, hysterical laughter. The kind that happens when you've just done something so enormous that your mind can't quite process it. They did it. They killed Caesar. The tyrant is dead. The Republic is saved. Except, now what? The conspirators stand in the empty Senate, holding bloody daggers, and suddenly realize they have no plan. They were so focused on the moment of a knife that they forgot about the moments after. Caesar's armies are still out there. His veterans, his loyal soldiers. Mark Antony, who they prevented from intervening, is still alive and probably furious. Cleopatra is in Rome with Caesar's son. The people loved Caesar. The mob is unpredictable. Brutus tries to address a crowd outside. He's covered in blood, holding a dagger, shouting about liberty and tyranny. The crowd stares at him in shocked silence. These aren't aristocrats who understand subtle political philosophy. These are common Romans who remember that Caesar gave them land, jobs, entertainment, and debt forgiveness. They don't see liberators. They see murderers. The conspirators retreat to the Capitoline Hill, Rome's religious center, hoping the sacred space will protect them. They're calling themselves the liberators. They're waiting for the cheering, the gratitude, the vindication of their actions. Someone sent for Mark Antony to negotiate. Surely, now that the tyrant is dead Everyone can see this was necessary. Surely Rome will return to the Republic. Back in the theater of Pompey, slaves are cleaning up. They wrap Caesar's body in his blood-soaked toga. They count the wounds. They note how he fell, where he died, the way his hand was positioned, still reaching for something, even in death. Power, maybe, or mercy, or just one more breath. News spreads through Rome like fire through dry grass. Caesar is dead. Someone killed Caesar. The conspirators say they're heroes. Mark Antony says they're murderers. Nobody knows what happens next. The city holds its breath, waiting to see if this is the end of tyranny or just the beginning of something worse. The Ides of March have not yet passed. You wake up on March 16th. Rome has no ruler, no dictator, no plan, just a corpse, a power vacuum, and everyone with a knife or an army wondering what happens next. The conspirators are still on the Capitoline Hill. They spent the night there, surrounded by guards, telling each other they did the right thing. Liberty is restored. The Republic lives. Any minute now, the people will understand. Any minute now, the celebration will begin. It doesn't begin. The streets of Rome are silent. Not peaceful, silent. The kind of silence that happens when everyone's holding their breath, when nobody knows if they're about to witness history or become part of it. Shops stay closed. People stay inside. The Forum sits empty, which almost never happens. It's like the whole city is waiting for someone to explain what comes next. Mark Antony explains. Remember Antony, Caesar's right hand, military commander, political operator, the man who was conveniently delayed outside while his friend was being murdered. Antony isn't subtle. He isn't philosophical. He's a soldier who just lost his general, and he's absolutely furious. But he's also smart enough to pretend he isn't. Antony negotiates with the conspirators. He's reasonable, diplomatic. He suggests a compromise. Amnesty for the assassins, but also honors for Caesar. Everyone wins. The Senate, what's left of it, agrees. They're desperate for anything that looks like stability. The liberators come down from their hill, thinking they've won. Then Antony asks to speak at Caesar's funeral. Brutus should say no. Cassius definitely thinks he should say no. They both know Antony is dangerous. But Brutus, idealistic, naive Brutus, believes in proper procedure and Roman tradition. Caesar deserves a public funeral. Antony was his friend. Of course he should speak. What's the worst that could happen? Everything, as it turns out. Caesar's body is brought to the Forum on March 20th, 5 days after his death. They've prepared him as well as they can, cleaned, dressed, arranged to hide the worst of the 23 wounds. They prop him up on a funeral couch in the Forum for everyone to see. Except he's not really propped up. He's a wax effigy, a model of Caesar showing every wound, every stab, every betrayal made visible. The crowd gathers. Thousands of them. These are the people Caesar gave land to. The veterans he paid. The debtors whose burdens he lifted. The common Romans who saw Caesar as their champion against an aristocratic Senate that didn't care if they lived or died. They're not here to celebrate his death. They're here to mourn. Brutus speaks first. He explains about tyranny, about liberty, about the Republic. It's a good speech. Logical. Clear. Exactly the kind of argument that works in a philosophy classroom or a Senate debate. The crowd listens politely. Some even nod. Brutus finishes, probably thinking he's convinced them. Then Antony takes the stage. He starts slowly, respectfully. He's not here to praise Caesar. Oh no, nothing like that. The honorable Brutus has explained everything. Caesar was ambitious. Caesar was a threat. Caesar had to die. Antony understands. Really, he does. But then, Antony holds up Caesar's toga. The one Caesar died in. Still soaked with blood. Still torn with 23 holes. He points to each rip, each stain, naming which conspirator made which wound. Here Brutus stabbed. Here Cassius struck. Here another, and another. The crowd sees the toga, sees the blood, starts to understand exactly how Caesar died. Surrounded, betrayed, stabbed by men he'd called friends. Antony reads Caesar's will. Caesar left money to every Roman citizen. 75 drachmas each, about 3 months' wages for a laborer. He left his gardens to the public as parks. Even in death, Caesar is giving to the people while the Senate takes away. Historians still argue whether Antony planned this moment or improvised brilliantly. Either way, it works. The crowd isn't just sad anymore. They're angry. They're rage-filled. They're a mob, and mobs in Rome are dangerous. Someone sets Caesar's funeral pyre on fire right there in the Forum. It's not the planned location. They were supposed to carry his body to the Campus Martius, but the crowd won't wait. They pile furniture, benches, anything that burns onto the pyre. Musicians throw in their instruments. Veterans throw in their decorations. The fire grows, fed by grief and rage and the very pieces of Rome itself. Then the mob turns. They go looking for Caesar's killers. Any assassin stupid enough to still be in Rome is now running for his life. The mob finds a tribune named Helvius Cinna, completely innocent, wrong place, wrong time, and tears him literally apart just because his name sounds like one of the conspirators. His head ends up on a spear. His body becomes unrecognizable pieces scattered through the streets. The liberators flee Rome that night. Every single one. Brutus, Cassius, all 60 conspirators. They scatter to the provinces, to whatever armies or positions they still control, suddenly realizing that killing Caesar didn't restore the Republic. It just created a different kind of chaos. A more dangerous kind. Rome burns, not literally but close. Riots continue for days. Political opponents are attacked. Houses are looted. The city that the conspirators thought would thank them for killing a tyrant instead mourns him like a father, a patron, a god. Temples are built on the spot where Caesar died. The Senate, terrified, declares Caesar divine. Divus Julius. He's not just dead. He's a god now. And here's where it gets interesting. Caesar has an heir. His grandnephew, Octavian. Just 18 years old, studying in Greece when he hears the news. Caesars will adopt him posthumously, making him Caesar's son and heir. Young Octavian immediately takes his new father's name, Gaius Julius Caesar. He's nobody yet, just a teenager with a famous name. But remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Underestimating young Romans turns out to be consistently stupid. Octavian returns to Rome and finds 3 men scrambling for Caesar's power. Mark Antony, who has the army and the crowd. Lepidus, who controls cavalry and has legitimacy. And himself, 18, inexperienced, but carrying Caesar's name like a weapon. They'll form the second triumvirate. They'll hunt down every conspirator. They'll bathe the Republic in blood. And eventually, that teenager will become Augustus, the first emperor, ruling for 40 years and transforming Rome forever. But right now, on March 20th, watching Caesar burn in the Forum, nobody knows that yet. Rome is broken. Caesar is dead. The Republic is dying. And the worst is still ahead. Let's drift now into the years that follow. The years where blood pays for blood, where Rome tears itself apart one more time, where the Republic finally, truly dies. Not with a dramatic assassination this time. Slowly, quietly, transformed into something new while everyone pretends nothing has changed. The second triumvirate hunts the assassins methodically. Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. 3 men sharing power in a way Rome has tried before and never quite managed. They make lists, prescription lists, just like Sulla did decades ago. Names of enemies, names of the wealthy whose property they need, names of anyone inconvenient. 2,000 names. 2,000 death sentences posted in the Forum for anyone to see. Among them, Cicero, the great orator who had nothing to do with Caesar's assassination but made the mistake of opposing Antony afterward. They catch him fleeing Italy. Antony's soldiers cut off his head and his hands, the head that spoke against tyranny, the hands that wrote against it. They nail both to the rostra in the Forum where Cicero gave so many speeches. Antony's wife allegedly stabs Cicero's tongue with her hairpin. Revenge, Roman style. Brutus and Cassius flee east. They raise armies in Greece and Macedonia. Legitimate armies. They're governors of those provinces, after all. They have legitimacy, republican ideals, and the support of senators who still believe in the old ways. What they don't have is money. so they loot cities to pay their soldiers. The liberators of Rome are now sacking Greek cities and extorting tribute. The irony is lost on no one. The Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE ends them. Two battles, actually, both in the same location, weeks apart. Antony and Octavian bring their legions east to finish what Caesar started when he crossed the Rubicon. The first battle is chaos. Brutus defeats Octavian's flank while Antony crushes Cassius's forces. Cassius, thinking all is lost, has his servant kill him. Wrong information. Bad timing. Very dead anyway. The second battle destroys Brutus. His army breaks. His soldiers desert. Everything the conspirators fought for, the Republic, liberty, the end of tyranny, dies in a Greek field. Brutus takes his own life, falling on his sword. His last words allegedly reference Caesar. Even in death, he can't escape him. Now it's just a triumvirs. Three men ruling Rome, already eyeing each other suspiciously. Lepidus gets pushed aside first. Too weak, too ineffective. He's given meaningless titles and locked away in comfortable retirement. Nobody even bothers killing him. He's just irrelevant. That leaves Antony and Octavian. Antony goes to Egypt. He's supposed to be settling the eastern provinces, but instead he falls completely, hopelessly in love with Cleopatra. The same Cleopatra who was Caesar's lover. The same Cleopatra who had Caesar's son. Now she's with Caesar's best friend, and they're having children together, and Antony is giving her Roman territories like anniversary gifts. Rome is scandalized. Historians still argue whether Antony genuinely loved her or was making a brilliant political alliance. Maybe both. Maybe he didn't see a difference. Either way, Octavian uses it beautifully. Octavian, remember, still technically a teenager when this starts, plays the propaganda game like a master. He paints Antony as corrupted by Eastern decadence, controlled by a foreign queen, planning to move Rome's capital to Egypt. Some of it's true. Some is exaggeration. All the works. The Battle of Actium in 31 BCE decides everything. Naval battle. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet against Octavian's. It should be close. Both sides have massive forces. But Antony's sailors don't trust Cleopatra. Cleopatra's fleet suddenly retreats mid-battle, and Antony, whether out of love, panic, or strategy, follows her. His remaining forces surrender. The war ends not with a grand clash, but with Antony chasing after his lover while his empire collapses behind him. Antony and Cleopatra die together in Egypt a year later. He falls on his sword. She uses an asp, a poisonous snake, though historians still argue if that's legend or truth. Either way, they die. Their children are captured. Caesarion, Caesar's son with Cleopatra, is executed. Can't have rival heirs running around. The Ptolemaic dynasty ends. Egypt becomes a Roman province. Octavian stands alone, the last man standing after decades of civil war. He returns to Rome in 29 BCE, and here's where the real genius happens. He doesn't call himself king. He doesn't even call himself dictator. He takes the title Augustus, meaning revered one. He calls himself princeps, first citizen. He restores the Senate, holds elections, maintains all the Republican institutions. But everyone knows he's in charge. He controls the armies. He has tribunician power, meaning he can veto anything. He's imperator, commander, the word we get emperor from. But Augustus never calls himself that. He's just first among equals. The Republic is restored, he claims. Everything's back to normal. It's brilliant political theater. Augustus rules for 41 years, longer than Caesar dreamed of. He transforms Rome from a republic to an empire while pretending he's done nothing of the sort. The Senate still meets, but they rubber stamp his decisions. Elections still happen, but the results are predetermined. It's the Republic's corpse propped up and made to dance. And it works. Augustus brings peace. The Pax Romana. Decades without civil war. Prosperity. Building projects. Literature flourishes. Virgil writes the Aeneid, connecting Rome's founding to divine destiny. Art, architecture, law, administration, everything expands. The empire Augustus leaves behind will last 500 more years in the west, 1500 in the east. All of it built on Caesar's grave. Because that's Caesar's real legacy. Not the conquests, not the calendar, not even his own reign. Caesar's legacy is proving that Rome needed an emperor. His assassination didn't save the Republic. It demonstrated that the Republic was already dead, that the system was broken beyond repair, that Rome needed one strong ruler to survive. The conspirators killed Caesar but created the very thing they feared. Brutus stabbed his father figure to prevent tyranny and caused a century of emperors. Cassius fought for liberty and birthed an empire. They won the battle and lost everything. History remembers them not as liberators, but as the men who killed Rome's greatest leader. So rest now. Let the weight of empire drift away like smoke from Caesar's funeral pyre. Let the conspirators' daggers fade into memory. Let Rome transform century by century, from republic to empire to legend to ruin to eternal inspiration. The die was cast that day at the Rubicon. It landed how it landed. Caesar's blood watered the seeds of empire, and from that blood grew something that would reshape the world. Battles fade, wounds heal, but names endure. Caesar, Augustus, Rome. Close your eyes. Let history settle into dreams. 2,000 years of consequences from one man's ambition, one man's crossing, one man's death. The past is distant now, soft around the edges, just stories whispered into the darkness. You're safe here. History can't hurt you. The legions have long since marched into dust. The senators are silent. The forum lies in ruins, beautiful and broken, teaching lessons to anyone who'll listen. Sweet dreams.